Welcome to Confined Space Training. In this course, you'll learn the hazards associated with confined spaces, the procedures required for safe entry, and the responsibilities that help protect everyone involved in the work. After completing this course, you should know more about the definition and characteristics of a permit-required confined space and its hazards, hazardous conditions inside a confined space, entry and permit procedures, the importance and duties of attendants and entry supervisors, and the responsibilities of both the employer and the employee. Confined space hazards can include oxygen deficiency, flammable or combustible gases and vapors, toxic gases, engulfment in solids or liquids, high noise levels, grinding or crushing mechanisms, hazardous configurations, extreme temperatures, chemical exposure, and poor lighting. Understanding these hazards is the starting point for safe confined space work. A confined space is large enough for an employee to enter and perform work, has limited or restricted means of entry or exit, and is not designed for continuous occupancy. A permit-required confined space is a confined space that has or could have a hazardous atmosphere, engulfment hazards, a configuration that could trap or asphyxiate an entrant, or any other serious safety or health hazard. Entry occurs as soon as any part of a worker's body breaks the plane of the opening into a permit-required confined space. An entry permit is the written document the employer uses to authorize and control entry. IDLH stands for Immediately Dangerous to Life or Health and refers to any condition that poses an immediate or delayed threat to life, causes irreversible health effects, or interferes with a worker's ability to escape without help. Inerting means displacing the atmosphere in a permit space with a non-combustible gas, such as nitrogen, so the resulting atmosphere is non-combustible. Isolation means removing the space from service and protecting it from the release of energy or material through methods like blanking, blinding, disconnecting lines, or lockout and tagout. A confined space entry team typically includes an entry supervisor, an attendant, and at least one entrant. Confined spaces can be open or obstructed. An open space has no internal obstacles, while an obstructed space contains barriers or equipment that make movement and rescue more difficult. Obstructions such as baffles, mixing blades, ladders, or scaffolds can increase risk and may require permit procedures because they complicate rescue operations. A permit space may be above, at, or below grade. Elevated spaces have openings 4 feet or more above grade and may require high-angle rescue procedures because removing an injured worker is more difficult. Non-elevated spaces have openings less than 4 feet above grade and usually allow more conventional rescue access. A confined space can also have a restricted or unrestricted portal. Restricted portals are 24 inches or less at their narrowest point and can limit rescue entry, spinal immobilization, and the use of breathing apparatus. Unrestricted portals are larger and allow easier movement into and out of the space, but they still require hazard controls and planning. Some confined spaces have horizontal access with the portal on the side, while others have vertical access with the opening on top. Vertical spaces often require climbing or rope techniques, and retrieval can be more difficult. Keep in mind that if any part of your body breaks the plane of the opening, you have entered the confined space. Common confined spaces include tanks, vessels, storage bins, hoppers, and pits. These spaces require monitoring, testing, communication, and rescue capability because the leading cause of death in confined spaces is asphyxiation, toxic atmospheres, lack of oxygen, and moving equipment that has not been de-energized can all lead to serious injury or death. Hazardous atmospheres can include flammable gases, vapors, or mists above 10% of their lower flammable limit, airborne combustible dust that obscures vision, oxygen levels below 19.5%, or oxygen levels above 23.5%. Atmospheric testing must be done at all levels of the confined space because safe air near the opening does not guarantee safe air deeper inside. Additional confined space concerns include amplified noise, which can damage hearing and interfere with communication, hot work that increases atmospheric risk, and wet or slippery surfaces that raise the chance of falls or electrical shock. Appropriate PPE, including hard hats, boots, eye and face protection, gloves, and protective clothing, must be used when needed. Proper testing is essential before entry, Initial atmospheric testing should be performed outside the confined space, and remote areas should only be tested if the immediate area is safe to enter. Testing must be done with calibrated equipment, recorded on the permit, repeated for each initial entry and re-entry, and supported by continuous monitoring while the space is occupied. Confined spaces can fall into several categories. Some are safe enough to enter without a permit, some can be reclassified after hazards are eliminated, and some can be entered under alternate procedures if the only hazard can be controlled by forced air ventilation. If hazards cannot be eliminated or controlled in those ways, full permit-required entry procedures must be used. Before entering a space with a potentially hazardous atmosphere, the internal air must be tested with a calibrated direct reading instrument. The atmosphere should be checked in this order: oxygen content, flammable gases and vapors, and then toxic air contaminants. The space must also be isolated and may need to be purged, inerted, flushed, or ventilated to control atmospheric hazards. When contractors enter a permit-required confined space for another employer, both parties must coordinate entry under an approved permit-required confined space program. A signed entry permit must be posted or otherwise made available. Entrants must understand the permit and follow the written procedure. PPE must be worn as required, and at least one trained attendant must remain outside the space for the entire entry. The entry supervisor is responsible for determining whether acceptable entry conditions exist, authorizing entry, overseeing operations, and terminating entry when needed. This person may also serve as an attendant or authorized entrant if properly trained and equipped for each role, and the responsibility can be transferred during entry operations. The entry supervisor must understand the hazards involved, communicate with the shift supervisor or equipment owner about those hazards, verify that energy sources are isolated and locked or tagged out, confirm that temporary covers are used when needed, verify air sampling results, and make sure the permit is complete and all required procedures and equipment are in place before entry begins. During entry operations, the entry supervisor must cancel the permit and terminate entry if prohibited conditions arise, such as atmospheric changes, physical hazards, or changes in the job scope. The supervisor must also verify that rescue services have been notified, remove unauthorized individuals, maintain permit consistency during transfer of responsibility, and keep a copy of the permit at the entrance for the duration of the work. The attendant must understand the hazards of entry, including the signs, symptoms, and consequences of exposure, and be alert to possible behavioral changes in entrance. The attendant must communicate with entrants as needed, monitor their status, warn them when evacuation is necessary, and avoid doing anything that interferes with the primary duty of protecting those inside the space. The attendant must maintain an accurate count of authorized entrants, note when they enter and exit, remain outside the permit space until relieved by another qualified attendant, and summon rescue or emergency services when needed. If the space is left unattended for 30 minutes, entry points should be covered and initial sample points should be revalidated by the entry supervisor before re-entry. The attendant must monitor activities and atmospheric conditions inside and outside the space to determine whether entrants can remain safely inside. If an alarm sounds or conditions change, entrants must be removed and the confined space supervisor notified. The attendant must also prevent unauthorized rescues and keep unauthorized people from approaching or entering the space. Authorized entrants must understand the hazards they may face, sign the confined space entry log, inspect and use PPE and equipment properly, continuously monitor the work area for changing conditions, and communicate with the attendant as needed. Entrants must alert the attendant and exit immediately if a hazardous condition is detected, if warning signs or symptoms appear, or if evacuation is ordered. If a hazardous atmosphere is discovered while work is underway, all activities must stop immediately. Workers must exit the space, the hazard must be evaluated, and protective measures must be taken before work resumes. Because atmospheric conditions can change during entry, continuous monitoring is required for all confined space entries. Ventilation may involve exhausting contaminated air or blowing in fresh air if exhaust ventilation is not possible. Ventilation devices must move air through the confined space at all times while an entrant is inside, maintain adequate oxygen and visibility, and avoid introducing anything other than ambient air. Equipment must be properly grounded, secured, and positioned effectively for the space. In oxygen-deficient atmospheres, workers must use an air-supplying respirator, such as a full-face unit supplied by a cylinder or airline. In atmospheres with adequate oxygen but harmful contaminants, an air-purifying respirator may be appropriate. Atmospheric testing should always follow the correct order: oxygen, flammables, toxics, and then other hazards. If a confined space contains toxic gases but still has enough oxygen, an air-purifying respirator may be used if it is appropriate for the hazard. But if the space is oxygen deficient, an air-purifying respirator won't protect the entrant because there is not enough breathable oxygen to filter. In that case, an air-supplying respirator is required. Hot work inside a confined space requires a hot work permit in addition to the confined space entry permit. If welding is suspended, the welding machine must be disconnected from power or the engine shut off. Gas cylinders and welding machines must be kept outside the confined space, at least 20 feet from the entry point, and secured against accidental movement. When welding in a confined space that uses inert gas such as argon, supplied breathing air is required and may involve airline respirators, hose masks, or self-contained breathing apparatus. In other welding situations, a half-mask respirator with suitable cartridges may be required. If arc welding is stopped for a substantial period, electrodes should be removed and the machine disconnected from power. All electrical devices used in confined space work must be protected by an intrinsically rated ground fault interrupter. Confined space entry permits are valid for no more than one full shift and should not exceed 12 hours. If the team changes, work stops for 2 hours or more, an emergency alarm sounds, or another unusual condition occurs, the permit becomes void and must be reauthorized. Adequate illumination must be provided where lighting is limited, and explosion-proof lighting may be necessary in some environments. Because conditions can change suddenly, employers must have procedures for summoning rescue and emergency services, rescuing entrants, providing emergency care, and preventing unauthorized personnel from attempting rescue. Rescue personnel may come from an internal emergency team, an outside rescue service, or a combination of both. The employer must evaluate whether rescuers can respond in time and whether they understand the hazards of the permit space. Retrieval systems for non-entry rescue may include a retrieval line, chest or full body harness, wristlets if appropriate, and a lifting device or anchor. Your company is required to have a written permit-required confined space program. That plan should address company policy, definitions, identification of confined spaces, notification and warning methods, hazard identification, entry and rescue equipment, evaluation procedures, permits, entrant and attendant roles, supervisor duties, communication procedures, rescue procedures, closure procedures, contractor coordination, annual program review, and training documentation. A confined space entry permit should include the space to be entered, the purpose of entry, the date and authorized duration, the names of attendants and entrants, and the name and signature of the entry supervisor. It should also include identified hazards, isolation methods, acceptable entry conditions, atmospheric monitoring results, rescue and communication procedures, required equipment, and any other necessary information or permits. The employer is responsible for providing atmospheric testing equipment, ventilation, and respiratory protection, or other necessary PPE when required. Training employees on confined space permits and rescue plans, developing a written confined space program, and responding to and correcting hazards identified by workers. Training must be provided to each person involved in confined space entry based on the role they perform, whether as an entrant, attendant, or entry supervisor. Workers must be trained before their initial assignment and retrained when duties change, new hazards are identified, or weaknesses in the program are found. Training must be documented and verified for proficiency. Employees are responsible for testing the atmosphere before entry, periodically monitoring for changes, following permit procedures, ensuring an authorized attendant is present, correcting hazards they are able to correct, reporting hazards they cannot correct, and attending required training while following established safety procedures. Always remember, never enter a confined space if atmospheric conditions are not suitable. Test the atmosphere before entry, and periodically during the work, make sure an attendant remains outside the confined space at all times, and follow your company's confined space permit policies every time.